Good show. Very good show.
I'm assuming this is us. This is a good us. I like this us.
That's fine.
Right.
Mr. Chair.
All right,
To
so
call.
first item, call to meeting.
Okay. You can call the meeting to order.
Call the meeting to order. And the first item, obviously, there's nobody here, so no public comments.
Just so you are aware, I was contacted by somebody, and someone will be watching either the live, I don't know if this is live or I'm gonna be on the YouTube channel, but someone will be. It's another student. It's a college student that's in a nursing program, and what they need to do is go attend a meeting or review a meeting in their community that, while it's not related to nursing per se, it's related to something that deals with people's health. And so they took up affordable housing and shelter as something. Yeah, yeah, they contacted me on that. And
That's
so if there may be questions, and they may attend a meeting in the future.
Good.
So, and I also, I mentioned before the meeting that we had those 3 students from a class at the middle
Yes.
school. I sent an email to Mark Zito, superintendent, and Wendy Durange, assistant superintendent for curriculum, and their teacher also, expressing the pleasure we had having these students join us, and they were very participatory. At the end of the meeting, they asked questions, and they seemed very passionate about what they were talking about. And so we got some good feedback there.
I was surprised they were listening for the full hour.
Yes.
I
Because they
know.
had questions after the fact, so.
were.
Yeah, yeah.
You were very good at explaining things to them, too.
That was like really, I really enjoyed that meeting. Well, I
Yeah.
enjoy these
You weren't
meetings,
there.
but getting that
saw the video.
generation
I attend the
seeming
meetings as I
passionate
can.
about,
It
you
was,
know?
yeah, it was nice.
Nice,
It was-
yeah.
it was nice. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
All right, so moving on, approval of the minutes from the last meeting. Any questions?
We have some September minutes too. I don't know if these were extra, but there was September, and there was also October.
No. Last was September. This was October.
October. Yeah, September meeting I was at, so I can
Yeah.
make a motion to approve that meeting, those minutes.
We have the October meeting as well, it's right here.
Yeah, which I was not at.
All right, so motion to approve the October meeting minutes.
Aye.
Second, and I vote yea.
All right, so on an agreement.
Yep. And that's October, what about September?
And then motion to approve the minutes for the September 5th meeting.
Motion.
Okay.
Second, and
On an agreement.
agreement?
I have a question. We just received these minutes on the table tonight.
Yes. And you did.
And just as a matter of procedure, I haven't had time to read them. So can we put off approval of last month's meeting minutes until next month? Does that sound reasonable?
I have no
October
objection.
meeting, right? The October meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's unlikely that I would have any objection, but I just think in terms of fairness to the
That's fine.
process.
That's fine.
So, did we approve September?
On an agreement for this, to approve the September minutes?
Aye.
On an agreement?
Aye. Okay, so there,
We're getting both at once.
in October is
Table.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
table for next meeting.
Yep.
It's okay.
All good.
So,
Going back to your P and Z days, thank you.
all right, so updates and discussions on the next steps. Charles, I can start with you on the tiny houses.
Okay, so I mucked around a little bit on tiny houses. When we last discussed it up at the council table, you asked me to contact CHFA, which isn't an easy thing to do. I searched their website and there was nothing. I tried to go through the mortgage process, and they said you must contact one of the approved mortgage companies that we use. And so they provided a list. I looked at the list, and there was a company on the side of the Stein Highway. It's North Point. And so I contacted North Point, and I spoke with a Donald Murray. And we had an exchange, and then I forwarded to him certain things about tiny houses. And I said, his name's Don Murray. Speaking with me, I called you because CHFA's website suggested that your company may be able to answer questions about financing tiny homes. I wish to know if CHFA has any programs and/or provides financing for individual or developments of tiny homes, blah, blah, blah. And he wrote back to me. I said, let me see what I can find out. And that was on October 28th, so I haven't heard from him yet. Okay, I did receive correspondence from, I had contacted the building official in Rocky Hill, Michael Violette. And I asked him, I said, Michael, I'm on the, I know him, Rocky Hill Affordable Housing Committee. At our last meeting, we discussed tiny homes as defined in Appendix Q of the 2018 edition of the International Residential Code. I tried to see you, but you were away. After our Thursday meeting, they all were for about a week in Massachusetts doing something.
This is from their technical clerk, Christina Solomon. So she showed me where to find it, and I just got it out.
So Christine, is Michael here? There should be no reason why we wouldn't, this is writing to me on the 31st of October. There should be no reason why we wouldn't issue a building permit as long as it I think it should say, would be constructed in accordance with the current Connecticut adopted 2021 IRC code, including Appendix AQ, which I have to now go and look because.
It's right here, it's in your packet.
Okay, fine, good. And so then I had an opportunity to go look for a gift for someone. I went to Meriden, and I think in the package, Kim has reproduced, there was Kim, you'll tell me this is true, the News 8 report. Is this in the package?
Maybe.
Maybe. In any case, I'll address it.
Definitely. This,
Is that
No,
News
no,
8?
no.
That might not be it.
Okay, so in this News 8 report, because I Googled tiny homes, Connecticut, I want to see what the hits were. And it came up that there was an article about tiny homes. And the company that there's actually been a small community of 12 units built and now occupied. It was built in 2023, it's now fully occupied. It was built by the Carabetta Company. Carabetta Company, they were a family of Italian immigrants over the last 100 years, and they started with a shovel and a wheelbarrow, and now they've developed thousands and thousands of units all over Connecticut. And at one time, I was a consultant to CHFA, and I worked on a property they had in, I think it was New London. And when you work for CHFA, it's a wonderful thing, because you get to ask all these questions because they want money from CHFA. So they're very, oh, yes, okay, we'll get it. They're very nice. But I met a gentleman in there, Bill Stetson, who had actually worked with a company I worked in Massachusetts about a century ago. And in this News 8 article, it was, a broadcast, which you can then get digitized. There's Bill Stetson. And so I drove and I looked at it and I sent him a few pictures. They're very, the ones built there, what are my notes? Hang on. They had 12, 2 of which are 1 bedroom, and I think the 10 were 2 bedrooms. And I drove around. It was a very, very small site. They're all very close together. They permit each to have 2 cars parked. They're about 400 square feet. And they're renting them, I think, at market rents. It tells me that it can be done. Now, if we continue to have an interest, I'll contact Bill and I'll ask him, how did they finance it? I mean, I could go to the city hall and look up and so on, but I think he'll be cooperative and to say, did you do this through some kind of FHA financing or whatever?
Now, is he with Carabetta?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I can reach out to him.
Yeah. So is that something we're interested in continuing to pursue? I don't know if anybody looked at the land. I was going to look at the land in Rocky Hill, but I was letting someone else do that, the excess state of Connecticut DOT land. But this type of thing that they did, they were individually metered, and they must all have subsurface waste drainage to one point. I can find out all that kind of stuff, how they did it.
We do city water, city sewer.
Yeah.
In tying in with this, I looked at our accessory apartment regulations allow for, in our current zoning, allows for detached units. This fits in there, but our accessory apartments, you cannot exceed 30% of the gross floor area of the home. So, for example, I grew up in a 900 square foot home. That 400 square foot tiny house on the backyard of my parents' property wouldn't work.
Right.
But I think we need to modify our accessory apartment regulations to allow for this. We've had very few requests, but it's not that well known, really.
Yeah.
But we're getting more inquiries about it. Our definition of an accessory dwelling needs to change because it talks about either added onto an existing unit or contained within an existing unit. It doesn't talk about detached, so that there's a conflict in our regulations.
But I
It needs
thought
to be
there was a
correct.
overriding state law, the one that wants us to have affordable housing, that you could have, I think they call it an ADU or an
Yes,
accessory.
yeah,
But you
yeah.
can, I thought you could have a freestanding accessory dwelling unit.
Well, you can, and we changed our regulations to allow it, but our definition doesn't have that detached word in it. So I just wanted, so for clarification's sake, I think that's an amendment that we need to do, even though our regulations will be updated eventually.
We could get called out on that.
Yeah, I don't want to,
Yeah.
that.
I mean, one of the things that, again, I didn't spend a lot of time only because I don't know where we're all going with this. At one time, FHA, to get financing, required that manufactured housing be greater than 600 square feet. Okay? But tiny homes, under the building code that FHA supports, says they can't be greater than 400 feet. So there's something I gotta sort, it doesn't
Yeah.
make sense, because there's a lot of craziness about how much does a tiny home cost. There are, just as there are a million, I don't know what you call it, videos, articles, whatever on the internet, that Tesla has one for 10,000 or 20 or 30. The reality is nothing's that cheap. And there are lots of places that in order to get you to click on them, they'll say, you know, tiny home or cottage for something in the, 10, 20, 30, 40,000. I'm not convinced that that's true. It may be, but as I tried to say to the kids, that when you go to manufactured housing, you can significantly reduce the cost, and what we used to call mobile homes, they're in effect manufactured housing. Under the tiny homes, you can have a home with wheels that is in effect.
But that's not what we wanna go for.
No, that's not what we want to do, but there's, as we all know with government, things change slowly. And although everybody says, build more affordable housing, have more affordable housing, but it's not, when CHFA doesn't have something about tiny homes, call a mortgage broker. The mortgage broker says, I don't know what you're talking about. But the way it's set up, at least for some people, the communication processes, you've got to go through that way. Now, maybe one of us is talking to CHFA and Kim, maybe there's somebody who's going to be more open to, really what are they doing. I didn't want to go beyond a certain point because I'm not sure this committee wants to do that. And you just have to give me direction.
Yeah. So one thing is, for the detached units, does that come with like a separate meter for water, gas, electricity, or that will still be part of the primary?
Okay, well, we're talking,
Because, I mean.
here, here in our current regulation, the accessory apartments shall not be metered separately.
I think that's a drawback.
It says
But that's-
shall not.
Change.
That's what it says now. But
If
I
it's
want
ownership
to change,
thing, it
I
has
want
to
to
change.
change this.
Because
Right.
that can be another,
Yeah,
Issue,
right.
but it's the accessory dwellings, one is an owner and one is for accessory dwellings in our current regulations, one's an owned unit and one's a leased unit.
So
I understand the
Yeah.
legal difference between owned and leased, but how
That's
does that
what-
affect this? I don't see the significance of them
Yeah,
applying those. Can you educate me?
well, I mean, this is, an accessory dwelling in our current regulations
Right,
can be detached,
okay.
but it has to be not to exceed 30% of the gross floor area of the dwelling unit.
Yep.
So you couldn't have something you may not be able to have something that's 400 square feet. You may have like one room above a garage with an efficiency unit above the garage or whatever,
Right.
the way it's written currently. But I think if we want to add tiny homes, because we've gotten those requests,
Yeah.
like parents or whatever, living on the property, but yet having their own privacy or whatever, bringing in a tiny home.
Sure.
We have, there's someone I work with whose significant other, their son is autistic, and they brought in a tiny home to live, literally
Right.
like 50 feet away from mom,
Yeah.
because
It's important.
it's important for them to have their independence. They have their own kitchen, they have their own bedroom, their living room.
So under our current regulations, which tracks state law, we can do that, correct?
You can do that, but our definition doesn't match it, so we need to tighten that definition up.
But coming to your question about
But
ownership.
the utilities, they're saying in these regulations, the way it's written currently, accessory apartment shall not be metered separately for utilities.
That's
And
a
that's-
concern.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
so,
I think that's a stumbling block for us getting people.
so that's.
Maybe, I used to be a landlord,
Yeah.
okay,
not fun.
for units here in Rocky Hill.
Yeah.
And I was a real estate market analyst, appraiser, and all that stuff. And if utilities are included, landlords are always pissed off.
Yeah.
Because you drive by and the tenant's got the windows open in the winter and, you know,
Right.
all that kind of stuff. And it doesn't teach the discipline of being conscious about energy wasting. So is that something that you as the planner would object to if there were separate utilities?
I don't think I would.
But is there, okay, but it's something I think we should,
In
But I
my,
think we should
I'm sorry.
investigate that.
in my little brain, I'm thinking if I were a landlord anywhere in town, and I had a unit that was not separately metered, then I would have to calculate in a percentage of my
premium.
monthly bill as theirs. And if they're extremely frugal, that wouldn't be fair. And if they're extremely wasteful, to your point, that wouldn't be fair. There's no way to be fair.
what it does though, it adds a capital cost
Yeah.
in order to be separately metered and to have, you know, wiring that goes to us, you know.
It does,
Something like that.
it's gonna be wired anyways.
But I
you know.
think that we should not obligate someone to do it. Now, if a property owner says, I don't mind because I'm likely to have either children or parents or relative as the
Okay.
primary likely to use it, and I'm gonna pay for it anyway, then, you know, that kind of a connection may work.
Then, I'm sorry,
No, good.
could we as a board recommend to P and Z that they modify that to make it not an obligation, that it be,
Optional.
And-
It
yeah,
should be
make it
optional.
optional.
And actually, further in the packet, you're gonna see that in our affordable housing plan, there were several recommendations that were made where this body would, if they so choose, recommend to P and Z to amend their regulations. So that's something that this board has a right.
That's one of our
and almost an
responsibilities.
Obligation to do so.
The units in Meriden, they were very close together. And so I don't know if we permit detached accessory dwelling units or
In a-
tiny homes or
In
whatever.
a development per se,
Yeah,
There
well,
is
no,
a
just
re-
even on one, if it's a single-family home in our R20 district, and someone wants to go through the expense of
Yeah.
purchasing the unit, the utilities, and the siting, what is the distance between that,
that's more of a building code issue, I can tell you, and you may have even been on the commission at that time, when they did Rachel Drive, where they have very small lots, and the units, the requirement is a distance of 24 feet between units.
Okay.
But that may not be a building code. So there may be a building code associated with that.
Right.
So that's something I can find out.
So,
there are 5 photos, if you just want to take it and slide it.
Because there is a distance requirement
Requirement.
and things, because if, God forbid, there's a fire happening here, you don't want it to.
so if you're standing in front of the post office on the left, I haven't paid attention to it recently, but there's a small house.
Yes, that's correct.
So would that fit the bill? Like, is that what we're envisioning, something like that? It wasn't built to be this type of thing, but I see it as
Well,
an example of
The
it.
town parking lot is in between, then
Yes,
there's the house.
I'm just trying,
Yeah.
I have that vision.
Yeah.
It just popped into my head tonight when I
Yeah.
drive by it, because I think it's cute, so like, that's a way to,
Years ago, our regulations required that a single-family home was X square feet.
Yeah, when-
And there was this
Like that.
case law,
Yeah.
there's case law on this,
I-
that we cannot put a minimum size of
It's
square footage.
economic
Ah.
discrimination.
Yes.
When
we
I
cannot
built,
do that.
when I built the house that I live in,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah,
built
that's
it as
cute.
a rent, well, you can slide, there are 5. The requirement in Rocky Hill was a 1,250 square
Yeah.
foot house is measured by the exterior.
Yeah, we got rid of
And
that. You can't
I
do that.
got into some
Nice.
friction with the building official at the time, and they were being, it was stupid, because it was not long after that, I think, the law changed, that you can't have economic discrimination. You can put in private restrictions, for example, garages shouldn't face the roadway, and you can't have any clotheslines. There are certain things that are permitted, but the way it is, it made no sense to me, and eventually it disappeared. But I remember it was a problem where they went through every geometric measurement to see, was I cheating the town in some way?
So if we were to make that recommendation to P and Z, like what's the process to do that?
Exactly. Should-
I
For
would-
any
I don't-
recommendations, you vote on it.
There are 5.
I mean,
That's
I've
important.
seen pictures of the tiny
Right,
houses
I'm-
and the
yeah,
interior.
I'm
They're
kind
Yeah, but this
I
is
don't
just,
Oh, okay,
New
that's what I wanna know.
Englandy, it's
Because if we do, then I'll
next
recommend
to a
it.
school.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they could
And
even
if we
switch it
don't-
up so they don't all look the same,
Or informal.
different colors.
Yeah, I wouldn't say, well, there's some color, but they're,
But,
again, for space
I think
usage, I think
regardless,
they
right,
did it
whether
that
we,
way.
I think that can.
And the driving was U-shaped right
Yeah.
around,
Yeah,
you
it's
know,
nice.
it was pretty.
Right.
It just makes more common sense, and if you have a
It
separate
does.
unit, and we should have separate utilities, or the ability to have separate utilities.
So our question to you is, as far as process procedure on this board, if we're gonna make a recommendation to P and Z, should we vote on it?
you must vote on it. There should be a motion, there should be a specific, what you're recommending to P and Z. And then when we put that on the agenda, I would certainly ask someone to be present. I would start presenting it, and then I would have somebody from this group,
At the P and Z
sense.
meeting.
at the P
Yeah.
and
Okay.
Z meeting.
No, but before it gets there, do we need to vote internally that we
Yes.
want to present it? And can we do it now, or do we gotta wait until the next meeting? We are 4 of us here right now.
We're a
so-
quorum.
That's fine.
Alright, so
You want-
should we put it to vote that we make a recommendation to P and Z to allow separate utility lines? That's gonna be gas, electric, water.
cable,
Cable can be separate, I don't think it's considered
You're right.
utility.
you're right.
I think it's just gas, electric, and
Water.
Sewer.
water
Yeah,
and sewer.
water.
If that can, if the owner decides, can have a separate line.
I would second that.
Third,
All in favor?
Agreement?
It's
I
unanimous.
think that's good that it's coming up now rather than put it off to the side, we're making the decision now, this is good.
Oh, yeah,
Mhm.
I agree.
Yeah.
And, okay, so this is gonna be presented in P and Z's next meeting.
I don't know if it'll be the next meeting,
Or-
but I think it will at least come up as on the bottom of our agendas, we have Affordable Housing Committee, and I report as to what we discuss. And then maybe if they decide to go with this, then at that meeting for the hearing, we would have somebody come in.
Okay.
Fine.
And may I suggest, Kim, that maybe you speak to Michael Violet to find
Yes.
out
Yeah.
separation distance for structures. I don't know
Yeah.
how they express it. But is that a fire marshal issue or?
Yeah.
I think that's part of it.
We'll check that out too.
I guess our goal here is to make more better our ADU language or whatever, so that it's understandable and more flexible. So if someone
Yes.
wanted to do it, we're eliminating the unknowns and establishing the requirements that the
Yeah.
town of Rocky Hill would want under the various codes.
I don't like the accelerate ADU. I just think it sounds kind of like you're off to the side, you're not really home. I like the tiny house concept. I don't know if ADU has to be the official language that we have to use, but I just think saying tiny house has a different, maybe it's just me, connotation.
Yeah, but I think tiny homes is a subset of
Yeah.
the,
Of an
under the,
Oh, it
under
is? Oh,
Connecticut
yes.
general statutes that
Got it.
establishes that
Did
we
not
should
know.
exist as a commission supporting the town of Rocky Hill.
Yep, I did
I
not know
leave
that.
that to Kim, but.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I agree, it's.
It just
Yeah.
has a connotation.
Yeah,
I'm not a homeowner.
I
I'm an
entirely agree
accessory.
with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, another thing is, with respect to, I mean, I'll call them accessory apartments in our zoning regs, but this could be like in a cluster like they have in, is that Meriden?
Yeah.
It could be and this could be a separate section under regulations by itself, and it probably should be, because you could create a cluster development, whether it be even on their own little lots. You could do
Maybe,
that.
maybe Meriden,
Yeah.
if you speak to the
Yeah.
planning office there,
Yeah.
how did they do this?
Yes.
Rather than try to
Yeah,
reinvent something.
And
Yeah.
you can do that, common interest communities, that type of thing,
Yeah.
where you can have closer units, and a development of just these types of units.
And just to address the difference between the nomenclature of tiny home, which is established in the International Building Code, it has a maximum of 400 square feet, whereas an ADU can be in Rocky Hill up to
Up to
30%
30%.
of, if there's a 5,000 square foot house, you could have that seems like maybe there should be a cap on that end of it.
Yes, you can. And we don't have too many of those. The accessory dwellings tend to not be in some of the larger homes out on the west end of town.
They're usually built in.
Yeah, but we do
Separate
have,
apartment.
we do have some that are out there, but you wouldn't know that it's an accessory dwelling unit or a subordinate unit contained within the larger unit. It looks like a side door. There's accessory apartments there.
And I'm aware that people have tried to put living spaces, apartments over garages and so on.
Mhm.
Do we address that in any way?
That's considered a detached accessory.
Okay, but, and,
Some people have gotten approved for that.
and it meets all the different codes of having a vehicle underneath and a unit above?
If it's a legal unit, if it went through the process.
In a,
yeah,
in a
sure.
detached situation, do you think?
It's kind of an eerie ring.
My granddaughter's type 1 diabetic and I track her.
Oh, okay. There's,
I'm not tracking her that much.
Do what you need to do.
Yeah,
No,
Yes.
it's all right.
yeah. We do have some that were approved above garages. And fire marshal is involved also.
But you have, even if it wasn't a ADU, you have that situation anyway in some houses. You have an under-house garage.
Some, I mean, I'm sure there are some out there we don't even know about.
Yeah.
We used to have a process where you'd have to go before the commission and have a public hearing and and have a cost involved in notifying people within 500 feet.
Right.
We got rid of that process. The process is through a zoning permit. So,
For an accessory apartment.
yeah.
Do they have to put a sign out or?
And there was a time when the first accessory apartments first came on the scene, and when people applied for it, the neighborhood came out all against it. You're creating a change in the neighborhood, you're creating multifamily housing, how dare you? The appearance won't,
I was the first one to do it.
it won't fit in with the neighborhood, and now, I mean, it's nothing.
Well, we still have the rule of how much square footage compared to the primary residence this can be. And we also have the rule of how much square footage you can build on a piece of property. So, and we also have, as we've mentioned
Well,
before.
that's based upon setbacks.
Right.
It's based upon setbacks and lot coverage.
Mhm.
So you can build, in many areas, you can build very large homes, but it's based upon lot coverage
Right.
and setback
And
requirements.
this would be included in that.
Yeah.
Yeah. One off the subject a little bit. Is there anything that we have in our zoning that would prevent somebody with a travel trailer from calling that a tiny home?
Because under recreational vehicles are, and we may have to look at that definition because of this.
If you
because-
take the plate off, it's not a vehicle now.
Well,
And I want
So-
to avoid a problem in the future.
that could be an issue.
Yeah, I think under
Yeah.
the tiny homes do permit a wheeled, I don't know, I'm still not understanding.
Right,
I know what you
yeah.
are saying, I am in agreement with you, but I don't know if they permit the wheels because that's how it gets there. But then there are all kinds of things about tie downs and
But
wind
when
shear.
you're, when you're on
Mobile
site,
home type,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, you have to, it can't be mobile. You can't get it approved, here's my lot, I'm approving it over here, and now all of a sudden, now I want it over here, so I'm gonna move it over here.
Or you can't take it to Florida for $9
No,
and
no,
bring it
then,
back.
then you probably classify it.
Let me tell you where my brain thinks of this. I understand that the R factors in mobile homes, travel trailers, are really small. They're more for sound deadening than they are for protecting against Connecticut winters. And I don't think that would be an ethical unit for us to qualify as a tiny home.
Well,
No, I mean,
Yeah.
that's an RV under our zoning regulations, and that has to be parked in a certain area, and.
Right.
Yeah.
10 years ago, when I built an addition onto the home that I'm living, the process with the building department, and I assume it's getting more onerous, is that you have to fit into a insulation model that there's a coefficient or something that comes out of it. So your insulation in the foundation, in the walls, in the ceilings, the heat loss from windows, doors, and everything is all calculated. And at the end of the process, they say, no, you need to do more to be more energy efficient. I can't imagine that it's lessened. Kim, do you know what I'm talking about?
You were talking about the R factor, correct?
Talking the R factor?
Well, the
Sure.
overall
Yeah.
energy
Yeah.
efficiency of it.
Right.
I would hope, I believe, and I'm saying that the manufacturing process, because they can use spray foams and so on, probably more efficient than driving a machine. Have you ever seen the different kinds of spray foams, closed cell, open cell, and basically the quality of the insulation you get out of foam is only as good as the machine and the operator who may be paying attention. Is it getting too viscous or is
Expanding correctly in there.
It's complicated, and that's how I selected a company based upon their experience and the promise that Bill or Fred or whoever it was
Right.
gonna do the spraying, because it is expensive, the material, it's hard to fix or redo. But the quality of sprayed insulation far exceeds, you've probably all dealt with the pink stuff, putting it in
Sure.
or whatever. So,
I understand what you're saying, and the other aspect of it is a concern to me too, because a 400 square foot home is relatively tiny, and one of the problems with small spaces is you need air, constant ventilation coming in, because you can exhaust the oxygen supply in a unit. And that's something else, of course, the engineering of the homes would have to be.
And they have
Taken into
windows and
consideration.
egress issues are different in a tiny home. They allow the skylight, it's mandatory that you have a skylight typically in the loft area, which is the bedroom area, and that is your
Right,
second
escape window, skylight, yeah,
so,
which is good.
so.
Cool.
So moving on. Item B.
Thank you, Charlie, for all the,
well,
and I will contact Meriden, and I was also reach out to CHFA, some of the people that maybe were there during that presentation, maybe they would get.
do you want me to take the next step and try to reach Stedman and ask him about how the financing and so on? The guy who did, from Carabetta.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah.
All right, so on the housing forum, that's item 5B.
Yeah.
Did you get a chance to see what's available for the community home?
I know it was later in January, that we were talking about, but I was thinking of what exactly, what are we talking about when we're having this housing forum? Who do we want to be present? What are the types of things we wanna talk about? We need to be thinking of who are we going to ask to attend to talk
Yeah.
about.
I wasn't here at the last meeting, but your comment about wanting to keep it more localized as opposed to just everybody in the world, I agree with that. If we can invite speakers to come in who are more familiar with this area, I would appreciate that.
Or like our CHFA folks, I mean, they're here in town.
Sure.
Right.
They're-
I mean, for now, I think I agree that we should be more focused on Rocky Hill versus, but, steps on, how people can avail different loans. I mean, just as an example, right, they had this down payment forgiveness program. If somebody lived in a house for like, I don't know, 7, 10 years, etc. I don't think a lot of people know about this. So I think things like those would be a good starting point. And that might actually benefit people who might not fall within the definition of affordable housing, but, it could still benefit them. So I think anybody within the town who would like to attend should be welcome. The focus should be more about, the different resources available from CHFA that people can, look into and choose from.
I mean, maybe talking about accessory apartments, maybe talking about tiny homes. I mean, this may be in concert with P and Z doing the regulations, but talking about other ways, because there's affordable housing per state statute, and then there's making housing more affordable to people. And they might not know that you can do this. I know that Alan Smith was saying that there needs to be a process. What's the process for getting, and he uses the term ADU. What's the process? People don't necessarily know that there is
That's a good point.
this
Yeah.
available, you have the option to do this. And yes, it's not, there's some cost involved, obviously, there's cost involved, but garnering the rents from
Right, there is an
this income
upfront
to
cost,
make it
but
more affordable to
Mhm.
you. It's not necessarily creating an affordable unit as defined by, statute, but it's, I think we want to educate people on that too.
Yeah. I could go off on a different tangent, but I'll shut up.
No. No, do not.
You're about to engage in the update of the plan of conservation and development. And I'm just, as I'm sitting here listening to your suggestion, when I moved here, again, 42 years ago, I had 3 children. I had 2 when I started here. I ended up with 5 children. So I knew we were gonna have a lot of kids. And so we bought a big old dog of a house that could have a bunch of kids and dogs run around in. But in today's world, I'm not sure who buys the big old house. The people who bought my house have 3 boys, and so they're fine with it. But there are a lot of larger homes in Rocky Hill, and there was a period of time when they built 3,000-4,000 square foot houses. And I see them being purchased. I'm not sure the size of the families that live in those houses. Today, on whatever the drive is at the office park, Vessel's building 100 units of 400 and approximately 450 square feet. Outside here, they're building, I don't know what size those units, they're 1 and 2 bedroom units primarily. I don't know if there are any 3 bedroom units there at Kelson Row. But they're gonna be very, very expensive. The market that this committee is addressing itself to is small. And I don't know, the Plan of Conservation and Development will look at census data and say, in Rocky Hill, there's a trend towards fewer children in a family.
Yes.
School
And-
enrollment's dropped, I believe, in the last
That's
few
correct.
years.
Not just Rocky Hill, though, it's.
that's
Yeah.
the national
Yeah.
trend.
Certainly. And so, affordability is a function of a lot of things. I mean, the land and the zoning, I think what they did in Meriden is a good thing, because they did, I thought it was basically like a single-family lot, maybe 20,000 square feet, 100 by 200, maybe a little bit bigger. That, to me, is sort of where we need to focus. The idea of putting a single unit in some R40 or something, I don't think we're gonna get that.
We can put these in people's backyards.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I see happening also. And then we talk about like middle housing, where you may have like 4 to 10 units together. It's not it is a multifamily development, but they call it middle housing now. And they may be affordable units, or they may be, a certain percentage would be affordable, as defined by statute. And that's what I see even along Celestine Highway, mixed use with affordable component along Celestine.
Whereabouts, I can't picture anything like that.
No, there isn't anything.
Oh, I thought you said that there, okay.
That would be
Yeah.
nice to
Yeah,
get
yeah.
that.
There's gonna be elderly who may wanna sell their big house and maybe stay in the community, because Florida always has some new catastrophe.
Yeah.
Of weather, and if they wanted to be able to stay here, there could be for sale, smaller homes or whatever. I mean, is that something I think we ought to look at? So it's hard to say who this housing meeting should be for. I don't know if we're far enough along to have it, because I'm not sure we know what we're doing. But I'm saying with the Plan of Conservation and Development passed and proposed, it sort of identifies, well, what are the demographic changes going on in the community, what type of housing can we have? And housing's really lousy to change. It doesn't change, easily. If a building's there and exists, it's hard to, many people live in a place that's probably too big for them, but that's hugely expensive. And as our taxes go up and insurance goes up and the craziness of electricity and everything else, there are a lot of economic forces that are saying we really need to do more smaller. And we're sort of dealing with affordable here as the government, the state of Connecticut says you gotta focus and do something. But that doesn't mean that there aren't people of higher economic means who would also prefer to spend less money, because most of the new house construction's at least, 2,500 square feet. Are there any houses being built in Rocky Hill now?
Right now, no.
No. On Old Main Street, there are 13 lots that are approved, and I have no idea where they're going, but if you go on their website, T&M Builders, they're planning to build, let's say, 2,000 to 4,000 square foot houses, the buyer's option. So there's really not a lot. And Rocky Hill, legally affordable is supposed to be deed restricted. Is that the only affordable housing we're supposed to be dealing with this committee?
I don't think so. I mean, I try to say, there's affordable as defined by statute, and that's what the plan is, but there's also housing affordability, making housing more affordable to people, and that's part of this group too.
Yeah.
It's part of this group too. I mean, we're not getting to this nebulous 10% that everybody says, but that's part of this.
Like
We have to do
this,
that too.
like the ADUs, for example, right? I don't think you're gonna ever have, or maybe, but deed restricted for 40 years. Most people would not opt for it because, nobody wants to live, or no,
It's an
average-
uncertainty, yeah.
Average,
Right.
people don't live in a house for 40 years.
Right.
So, nobody wants to have that handicap attached, like when they wanna sell their house, the ADU comes with a deed restriction. I think that deed restriction would probably be more when, like how you had suggested, town had suggested, right? Like, we have a lot of land where we can approach a developer to come build, and then, there's some incentive for them to do that.
Subdivide?
Like when you take and create multifamily units, you could set aside a percentage of the units to be affordable as defined by statute.
Right.
That's where we're going to get the units.
So part of the issue is land, labor, capital, in terms of economic elements. Our town zoning, the minimum single-family detached is in R20, correct?
Correct.
So,
The way it is now, yes.
there used to be an R15, but there isn't anymore. The people who run the town, through efforts of planning and zoning, they came up with increased density on the same piece of land, and so there's front yards were reduced for Kelson Row and a lot of other things. When developers use the state law, like the vessel and so on, they're getting a zoning premium out of it by deed restricting for 40 years. In these cases, it's apartments. I'm suggesting we have a discussion for our own purposes of about affordable, and it might not meet the state definition with the 40-year deed restriction, but Tim, it goes to what you just said, making it more affordable. Perhaps we need to think about affordable owner occupied, so that a smaller size lot, you know, because nobody wants to have a tiny home with a 20,000 square foot
Yeah, makes no sense.
landscaping obligation. Now,
Makes no sense.
it's sort of like condos, detached condos. And do we have detached condos in Rhinebeck?
We do, but it's common interest, so it's on one property. We do off of Skyview Drive. We have detached.
Skywers.
We also have, I mean, they're not affordable units.
Right, I understand.
But we also have on the corner of Elm and Gilbert, where Drisdale built Windmill Crossing.
Yeah, okay.
We also, at the end of Elm Street Extension, where Harry James built a development there for, it's more age restricted,
age
but those are
restricted.
detached. Some of them are common wall construction. So we do have those, but those are common interest communities, so they pay.
Right. So it can go either way.
Yeah,
Um,
but you can have small lots. I served as a town planner for a very short period of time in Plainfield. So they had villages, you know, Warregan, Moosip, you know, Central Village or whatever. And many of these villages had older mills. They were old mill
Right.
communities, and where they had workers' housing on very small lots. And some of them were duplexes. But that's the way they were way back when. But I think you're talking about sizes like that. I mean, the lot sizes were like 5,000 square foot max
Well,
there, but
and
here
that's
you could even go smaller.
That's
to
another
900
good point. If you have a duplex and an owner's on one side, and he can rent it out for income on the other side, and deed restricted, because as an investor,
Yeah,
I think that works. It's different than,
we get a lot of questions for duplexes, a lot.
yeah, I mean, that's the entry level for someone who watches the videos at 2 a.m. where, you know, it'd be to make $1 billion in real estate. And they generally, you buy a fixer-upper and so on. So this all comes back to who do you want to be at a housing forum, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know if you can do it once and hit everybody you want to need. I don't know. I think it makes sense to ask the community. Has that been done in the process where there's a mailer in the tax bill or something where you say, well, you know, I don't know, or when the plan of conservation and development is done, is it done then?
We want to get feedback from our boards and commissions and the public or whatever, and do a public forum or whatever for the POCD, as far as, you know, charrettes, and, you know, get people in to talk about what they want, and that's one of the things I want to talk about.
Charrettes.
You know, we're getting people in and saying, you know, what do you like about the town, what don't you like about the town, you know, here's a piece of paper, tell me what you think,
Yeah.
or here's Post-it notes, and go and
Where
put it
where
out.
are you on the,
Well, we're gonna get to that.
okay.
What is POCD?
The Plan of Conservation and Development. Thank you.
It's a statutory obligation of each city and town to have one every
10 years.
I have a question, because I need to be educated again. I have a piece of property, I put a small, tiny house on it,
Okay?
so I want to rent it, I want to deed restrict it. Can I deed restrict just that tiny house? Or does the whole property have to be deed restricted?
There's a deed restriction on that particular,
On the dwelling and not the property, that the whole deed covers?
well, the deed goes to the property, but you're restating on the record what it's talking about. It's not your primary dwelling
Right,
and the accessory dwelling, it's the accessory dwelling. But you're putting that in the deed.
right, so so.
And
all right, got it.
that rent or that,
That rent will
that-
be down by 20, 30, or 60, or 100%.
Right.
And we're restricted to that, just
Yeah.
on that tiny house.
Yep.
Okay. I wasn't clear. Thank you.
yeah.
But
But even then, I mean, even then, when you think about what an affordable rent is in Rocky Hill, because it goes with a greater area, I mean, our rents are like, affordable rent is like 1,400 to, 16.
Well, it's going to
At the
be-
end. Yeah,
I presume that you would use some HUD or CHFA, so it's
Yeah.
30% of the median family income for Hartford County, blah,
And
blah,
then-
blah,
yes.
including utility expense, and that's posted every January or
Yep.
something like
Yeah.
that.
So-
And supposedly for all the other affordable housing that we're going to have or do have, there's an audit that's done periodically, theoretically, but so it goes. Yeah, it's a process.
But again, I don't see any economic benefit why somebody would do that, right? Like deed restrict an accessory dwelling.
Well,
I-
there'll be a stream of income.
Yeah.
Um,
Hi, Madam Mayor.
yes, would you like to join us?
No, it's on TV.
Oh, I don't know if it's on TV. Would you like to join us?
No, I have 2 meetings I have to go to.
Oh.
I just heard voices.
Wanted to see.
Okay. Anytime
Thank
you
you
would
for
like to
stopping
join us.
by.
it-
I would like to join you.
Okay. Okay.
It's no different than probably any income property that someone deed restricts. You know you're gonna get less, but it does exist.
And you're still getting, and there may be some incentive that maybe the town could provide. A
That's
small, a
exactly-
small,
yeah.
That's
small-
what I wanted to
Reduced
get to,
assessment or whatever.
If there
A
is
small
some
tax
incentive
or
that can be
whatever,
provided, because right now, like to
but
build that accessory, there is no other incentive coming through.
however, you're taking money, whatever that is, and it could be an affordable unit at $1,400, whatever it is, and that's coming off your mortgage. You're taking that money and you put that on your
But
mortgage.
I can
payment.
still rent it out for
I don't know.
1,800 and
I
it's
don't
still
know.
coming off my mortgage, right?
Yeah,
So,
but maybe there's
so
something else.
we need to,
Yeah,
how do
Yeah.
you incentivize somebody to?
We need to
But
walk it through.
otherwise they wouldn't do it, of
And
course.
be able to
Yeah.
demonstrate that there may be
There
an
has to be
economic
some
motivation.
benefit that if you do this and deed restrict it for 40 years, just the accessory like you
Right.
mentioned, then this is the benefit that you're gonna get versus what you might, like say it's 30% rental that you're gonna lose on. So that incentive needs to be kind of at least 30% offset, right? Otherwise, why would you let go of a market rate?
Well, think about the I'm walking through this process as you raise it. Belfonte or the Vessel people, they're agreeing to deed restrict the apartments that will be designated affordable. The benefit they're getting is greater density, okay? So if you're going to buy a single-family home in Rocky Hill, and it includes a rental unit that has separate utilities, and assume the utility portion is not from the landlord's pocket, they still will get a rent level. And at present, the law is it has to be at 80% of the area median income. Well, that's still a pretty good.
But that's exactly my point. I can still do the same thing, right? I can still build an accessory unit in my backyard, right, and rent it at market rate.
But is that what we're saying?
There is no restriction on me that if I'm gonna build an accessory unit, it has to be within the definition of affordable housing. Number
Right
one.
now, there's not,
That is
The
not-
state
written-
law doesn't,
There's nothing.
the state law
written-
forces the town of Rocky Hill to allow ADUs, correct? But it doesn't say that they must be affordable.
That's right.
Correct.
Correct.
So, my question is, again, talking
No, it's a good point.
capitalist
It's a good
Probably
point.
mindset.
Do that.
If I
I'd
have,
have to check that out, but we could probably do that, but we'd have to check that out.
right, if my cost to build the unit is the same regardless whether I'm gonna do affordable or not, then my next instinct is to maximize the rent I can get from
Right,
it
Yeah.
Pay it off.
to offset
right.
my,
Yeah,
maximize income.
I thought you were obligated to,
our accessory apart regs as they stand now they're not affordable. It makes your unit more affordable in that
It
you're
makes
getting.
housing affordable.
It makes
yes.
housing more affordable in that you're getting some income in to either pay your grocery bills. or
Whatever it is,
Whatever
yeah.
it is.
theoretically,
Yeah.
but the state law, I want to ask again, does not require that the owner of the primary property where the accessory dwelling unit will be added, they're overriding our zoning saying that you can do it, correct? Because
Well,
we
you're talking-
didn't permit it before. We did permit certain accessory apartment units under certain conditions.
And that's what we have in our regs now. We have what we had before.
I think, but that's, I think, more to make housing more
More-
affordable.
More affordable,
Per
not
se,
necessarily
not-
defined by 830G.
Exactly.
You know,
But there'll be no
that
benefit
way.
statistically to the town if all of a sudden we had 1,000 single-family detached homes add accessory dwelling units.
Could
There'd
have
still be-
zero
It would just
benefit.
create a higher density.
We
Yeah,
create-
we could have zero change in our statistics for affordable housing.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I don't think why would anybody on purpose,
Yeah.
volunteer to take a lower rent, when they can actually
And make
get
their,
more in the
I
market?
possibly make their home
Yeah.
worth less when they go to sell it.
I mean, there's gonna be a
Exactly.
unknown minority group of people who think it's the not good thing to do.
So like,
Oh, yeah.
like Kelson, as you mentioned, right, like, they got a benefit, they are able to
Greater density.
have greater density.
Right.
So there was an economic benefit that outweighs the cost.
And that's what
Of-
developers are telling us. They're saying, listen, we need to get more units. That's what they're saying on Stepney Place, because we got a small percentage of affordable units. And that's what they're saying, you have to give us density in order to make it work. Or you have to give us some, leeway on setbacks. Or,
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure
something.
if you give them the ability to build, say, 10 more units and you ask them like, mark 5 as affordable, I think they'll be very happy to do that because, the benefit of having those 5 units over the next, say, 40 years at market and the remaining 5 at, say even if it's at the 70% of the thing, it still outweighs it because you're getting those extra units on that same piece of land.
Which doesn't work when it comes to the single-family home.
Single-family
Putting it
home
in.
building and.
Right, it's a different thought process, I'm sorry.
I think for this idea of the housing conference, I
think we need to.
I would like to know, and I don't know if the public would respond and tell us, the desirability of living in a small detached unit that's just yourself versus common wall in an apartment complex or a condo building complex. The units, I don't know if you've driven by on Brook Street where they're building them, they're basically delivering manufactured boxes and stacking them. And there's some unusual aspects about it. There are no solid floors. It's a central double-loaded corridor, you know what I'm saying? If you're in the corridor, this is the corridor, the table's the corridor, their unit, your chairs off on both sides. And all it is steel grating for 3 or 4 stories up.
Is that the Henkel way?
Yes,
to
Yeah,
build it?
that's-
and somehow that eliminates part of the fire risk. They don't have to sprinkle the building.
Because the hallway is actually outside,
Yeah.
considered outside.
And then the outside staircases have some kind of crazy netting of
Yeah,
some unknown type. So from the standpoint of it, some of the units are going to be more affordable than the market rate units in the building, for which they then got this density bonus. But they sound to me, who's lived in a traditional house with one family most of my life, I don't know if I could live in a place like that.
You envision raising a family over there. When you're single,
Yeah.
just, no kids, it's
I guess
different.
it's
So
two ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if somebody was raised in an apartment complex,
It may be a young
Yeah.
family with
Yeah.
one child, who knows?
There was one occurred recently, and I meant to print it, yes, I still get the physical people, because I cannot stand doing everything on this. But Vessel was part of it, am I pronouncing that right?
Yep.
Vessel?
Yeah.
It was talking about, affordable housing, and it was cited as a company that is making things happen quickly, and all the things you just said were accurate. And, there were multiple towns, there were probably like a half dozen, I think, and, they cited specifically Rocky Hill as the largest one it has going on. And it was talking about how it's manufactured, which is what you guys were just
Right.
talking about. Which is why they can put them up quickly and, meet quotas and all that stuff.
Yeah, but going back to the demographics of people who may live here in the future, I have no idea how families are smaller, I think.
Families are, demographically, we're aging faster than the state is aging, our population.
you're not talking about people at this table, right?
Well, no, I'm talking about myself, no, but the town is aging faster and has an older average age than the state of Connecticut. We also have people are having less kids. Before it was 2 point some had kids, and now it's less than that.
Right.
So, many are choosing not to have kids. And we saw it at the Board of Ed budget, I think you mentioned something about the budget during the budget presentations for the last few years, the school age population is actually decreasing. And there's been studies done for some of our newer apartment complexes in town, like Altair and Montage, off of Brook Street and West Street, 144 units each. And I think one complex has 11 kids. One complex has less than that. So, it's
Okay.
So.
Well,
That's,
yeah, I think this last summer was an experience where the electricity has jumped for people.
Yeah, everybody.
Property insurance has jumped. Utilities are always going to increase, and
Right.
MDC bills are ridiculous compared to what they used to be. A lot of it is we're paying taxes that we really don't understand. So I think there's the desire, tiny is maybe not the best term, smaller. I think there's a reason to have smaller. Now, whether all of it is affordable and, maybe some of what comes out of our discussions ends up being advocacy for an alternate from the present zoning is pretty stuck as to 20,000 or 40,000 square foot lots. Nobody's really building or developing them because the land's so expensive. The construction process is so expensive now. And Kelson Row is being built because they're getting a fairly substantial subsidy. I understand all of that. But when there are lots approved on Old Main Street that they're not building, then there's legal issues with that. Are we at an equilibrium where there's no increased demand for houses of a certain size? Often when you have a market like this, smaller things trade. They trade at a higher cost per square foot because there are no other alternatives. It's a question of affordability is, okay, smaller is cheaper. Smaller lots would be cheaper. So I don't know if the supply and demand of larger, again, maybe we ought to have a Realtor. Well, Smith is a Realtor.
I'm a
We're-
Realtor.
She's a
Yeah.
realtor, right?
You're a
Yeah.
Realtor as well. Who do you work for?
I'm William Ravis.
Okay. So you should be able to tell us, what do people want? I think that
I
comes
think
under the form.
everything, right? I mean, all I see in Rocky Hill is there is a listing and then a week later that's gone.
Well, yeah,
So,
it
and
is.
this is like all big,
Yeah.
small, like, you know.
And, pardon me, I see a lot of Indian people purchasing, and I don't know if the Indian community has more children than non-Indian.
No, it's just a desire to, I guess, the American dream of, you know, owning
Yeah.
a home with two
And
cars.
education is driven, I mean, Rocky Hill Schools I think they have a reasonable perception of quality. And I don't know the enrollment, I don't know if the word is decline or stabilized or whatever, is that because the housing market is so lousy, you have a lot of older people staying in a place that's too big? Is there a?
No, we see a lot of people, we see a lot of the people are downsizing and going to the age-restricted communities. We're seeing a lot of that now.
I think the bigger issue, I think at least in Rocky Hill, is there is just no inventory for more people to come into the town. If I have to guess, like based on, you know, other people my age, you know, who are in this phase of, you know, want a home ownership, it's like there is nothing available in Rocky Hill, and I'm not talking about like big houses in general.
You're right.
Yeah, just any.
You're right.
Just about anything,
Yeah.
you know, so it's the lack of inventory within the town that is, I think, the biggest reason why we're not seeing a population increase. I think if we had more inventory on the market, I would definitely see more people willing to come in.
So maybe a
That could-
retired couple without children gives up to, because many of the homes in my neighborhood, they were older, retired, and then when someone buys it, they'll have XYZ kids generally of just about the age to go into school and so on. So that might be the dynamics of it. I just think that we ought to have that as a background thing to understand, and maybe if we have two realtors, maybe we ought to get put an agenda item here to try to sort of find out, would a tiny home sell? And at what price? I don't know. The other thing is, can a single-family detached homeowner legally rent out a room?
I would say yes. I would say yes.
Actually, I have a question, and this could be,
I mean, we've had instances where someone owned what they can't do, we had someone that owned a condo, and what they did was, it was a 3-bedroom condo, they rented all 3 bedrooms, but they weren't there.
and
That was a
subleased.
problem.
Yeah,
That was
subleased.
like a boarding house. That was
Some-
an issue.
Sometimes I have seen in town, but it's been a long time, you'll see a sign on someone's yard saying room for rent.
Yeah.
You know, room, doesn't say house for rent. Yeah.
Can somebody sell a part of their lot?
Well, it depends. Again, for example, if you have a 20,000 square foot lot and you want to sell some of your land to me, but your lot's 20,000 square feet and the regulations call for 20,000 square feet,
Then you can.
you can't.
But if it's more than 20,000 square feet, then can you?
Yes. Yeah.
There's a
But
concept
yeah.
called surplus land or
Yep.
excess land.
Yep.
Now, again, as she just said, if you're in an R20 zone and you have, that's 20,000 square foot, that means you have to have 100 feet of frontage.
Yep.
But you have a 40,000 square foot lot, but it's only 100 feet wide. You can't, there is no benefit, you can't really do anything with
The rest of
the rest of it in the back. If you had 120, then you can have a rear lot on this, it's geometric complications to
Yeah.
where does the land exist?
Yeah.
And you're permitted what's called one, I don't know, maybe you still are, one free subdivide,
Yeah, one-
where it's not a big zoning issue, is that,
After the day the subdivision regulations took effect, so that's a whole nother,
Right.
it's complicated.
Okay.
yeah.
How are we doing on our agenda?
Yeah, we're.
In the interest of brevity.
Well, I
So-
think
You
this
can
has been a
skip
very
B and
good
C
conversation.
Because they're not here.
Right.
I mean,
Yes,
but
it's
so-
been a great
yeah, I
I
conversation.
think for the housing forum,
I think we
we-
need to get our act together.
yeah,
before
we need to
just-
have probably more of a deep dive discussion on this, like what we wanna really present.
Yeah.
But which means that January is probably not gonna be a feasible date. We're gonna have to push it out further.
But that's
I'm
tie
gonna
down
assume
what we
you're
wanna
working
do.
on the agenda for the forum, and maybe some of the distinctions we wanna have is rental housing and for sale housing. Affordable housing under the state law about the 40-year
Yeah,
deed restriction. Because we may be able to provide housing that's affordable from a dollar and cents perspective, but someone doesn't want that, I don't think stigma is probably the wrong word, but the legal restriction, because I think that raises the negative perceptions in some people. That,
It still does. Not as much as it did,
Yeah.
but it still does.
yeah, I think the reality is, we're not likely to come up with a solution that's gonna give us 600 units of affordable housing that meet the current state statute, that puts us over the 5% threshold, or is it 10%?
10%.
10%. But there may be the benefit of having this kind of a discussion that Rocky Hill can take steps, whether they're in the zoning, in the building department, and the town council's understanding and approval that we're going to have a diversity different than November 2024, where we only have the minimum we have is an R20 lot for a single-family detached. I mean, if we could have much smaller single-family detached, then someone may, on their own, design their own tiny home or something under that general concept, maybe not 400 square feet, that we can do things that give us a diversity that addresses, well, what may be the demand for housing going forward. Because in a lot of ways, there were old homes like the one I've lived in, the Center Entrance Colonial, and then people started making what I call pseudo-colonials, where the builder went out and had a bunch of drinks, had a bunch of backs of napkins and said, I'm gonna put an extra dormer over here, and you get the housing that, it might have elements, it has plastic that looks like what the original wood siding was. It's a funny kind of thing, but there's so many creative people around the world that may be able to do something that's more interesting. We're in some ways handicapped by having historic districts here, and I'm in favor of them. And I don't want to see a historic district change by throwing in vessel kind of units, which are delivered in a plastic bag in effect. And they're always in a plastic bag.
But you could
because-
take, when I was, I had been married before and divorced, and when I got divorced, I actually looked at it was a condominium on Fairfield Avenue in Hartford. They took an old, very huge home, looked like a mansion, and divided it into 4 condos. And it was more affordable, and that's why I looked there. But you could take some of the big old houses and you could do stuff like that. You could divide them up, because once again, we still have to further the Fair Housing Act where there's housing opportunities for all. And people complain about, where you're creating so many apartments, and I hate apartments, I hate rental units. Well, we have to provide them, even though we have them here. We have a lot of rental units here, but we still have to provide them. And we still have to provide accessible units for people that may have disabilities. And we have to provide age-restricted housing. We have to provide single-family homes. And we should be providing middle housing, where you may have 4 units together.
Tiny homes.
Yeah, I mean, you have to provide these different things.
Right.
So,
So, I think that when we have a forum, we just have to be more focused on
Yes.
what it is.
Yep.
And I think, in my own mind, and I see this happen in town, I would advocate, and I don't know if the Affordable Housing Committee is in their purview, is that we should address affordable housing for homeowners. I think a homeowner has a different commitment to the community and to the neighborhood and to their housing, and that it not only be focused on rental. I understand the
Yep.
need for it. And so, again, as a housing forum, rental, ownership, structures of different types. Perhaps if we have smaller lot requirements, there's more infill that's possible. Because we're not as mature as Weathersfield. Weathersfield really can't expand because they have very little land remaining. We may have, I mean, that's something that wasn't Mr. Smith or someone doing an inventory of the land, or who was doing that?
You were
and
doing
we
it.
had that map
Yeah.
at one of our meetings. I didn't bring it with
I
us
drove
today,
by.
but.
All right, so we can have more focused discussion on this, maybe come up with more ideas into what we want to start with and then go from there, but that probably means that we're gonna push the thing out further, maybe like February or March. Rebecca, just gonna talk to you, she's not here.
The Housing Authority, they're right now, they have a grant that they're looking for. The grant that they have is to upgrade some of the units, but they're also doing a study. They have another grant to do a study to create, look at the land that they have near Widow, and to see, right now they're looking at units that would be similar to what they have now. As I mentioned the, building up, and they said right now that requires too much money. We can't,
Okay.
they're not thinking that way, but if we don't start thinking that way, then it may never happen.
Yeah.
So I think we do have to kind of keep them in the loop on that and start talking about
Okay.
going after larger units to do something like that. But they're assessing their property as far as, can they add more units? So,
All right, Jen, you were up.
I know that anything that gets distributed has to come from you, and here I am bringing it.
It's okay, that's fine.
Because I was printing this morning. I was trying to look up if there was anything more recent than what I had researched, and I found some stuff, so.
Thank you.
Yep. Everyone good? Okay. All right, so, the reason I printed this was, I'm looking into tools and ways of getting money. And, the first 4 pages are good to read, and I can gloss over them. But, what you may notice in the bottom, it was revised in August. What piqued my interest is the project administration, which is starting on the 5th page of what I handed out. And you'll notice it's revised in October. So that was last month. And this is the overview of the application process. So the page that says Chapter 1 at the top you go down to section 1.1, it is the overview of the application process. So, there are some links in this. I am going to be in the next week taking a close look at this, and I will share with you information, Kim. But the big thing in here, and it's not new, is that you need to get the applications in quickly. And in the spring is when they really want this stuff done. And I'm gonna, because we got involved as this team, this committee, in the fall, I believe. And I remember doing some research back then, and it was more, that's good to know, but we can't do anything about it.
Right.
So now, like I said, I'm gonna look at it this week, and I'll pass some information on to you, Kim. But this is what we need to do to seize funds in order to do all these like wonderful things we wanna do.
Now, when you say, because these are community development block grants, and I've been involved with the small
Yes.
cities. I've been involved with a grant in 1995
Okay.
and 1999.
Yep.
And then what they're doing at the Housing Authority, that's another small cities block grant.
Okay,
So they've been involved with that, and there,
so that's
it
good.
is a lot of work.
Yep,
It is a lot of work. But I've been involved with these
that's good to have
before,
experience.
So, as has our town manager in his economic development capacity, so,
It's not news then to you.
no.
Okay.
It's, and our, just so you know, our chairman of planning and zoning, used to work for Department of Housing. And that was what he did.
Full-time.
That's what he did full-time, so,
All right, so we have good resources.
so he's been involved with this.
So I'm not familiar with the Community Development Block Grant Program. It's on the front page here. But it's open to all towns in the state with the exception of the ones that are listed here. I don't know the particulars why those jurisdictions cannot receive the funds. But so my takeaway, again, is to dig deep in here and see what it takes. So we have that knowledge. Whether or not we can put in an application, don't know, but we need to know what we don't know and what we do know and what's feasible, and let's not spin our wheels on things that are not feasible. I didn't print this, but this, I think there's some stuff added. It's some links, a lot of links from the Department of Housing. Actually, I think I probably printed enough here. I did not go through these links. I just know that they were on the Department of Housing website. And they're hard to read, but I think there's some information that would be very relevant for us. I don't know until I start clicking the links. But there's just like so much information out there. It's overwhelming. You just have to find, the stuff that is relevant, and I will be doing a deep dive on that over the next couple weeks, because if we can do anything, we need to get our act together for the spring. And Kim, I'm happy to hear that there's already experience with all this.
I mean, this was more for like renovation
Is it?
of
Okay.
units. We didn't do anything to develop units. I know
Yeah.
they're looking at, and I think they got a grant for more of a planning grant. So they're having someone, like for example, the Housing Authority, they're assessing their land to see what's the potential of getting additional units there. So I can see that money being used for that, saying, or maybe purchasing property to do.
Not like
To do so.
big efforts, more like helping
Yeah.
things out, making them better, as
Yeah.
opposed to like, let's go and develop another thing. Okay.
I don't know that you're getting millions from you're not getting
No, I
millions from
wouldn't
a
think
small
so.
city. I think
Right.
there's a cap.
Right.
There's always a cap on that. And then, but there's other resources out there. Maybe you have something here that.
Yeah,
is
I need
that-
to look. I was disappointed last fall because I heard about this stuff and then I couldn't do anything about it because the money was all gone, everything, for the year was done. You couldn't apply, but, so I
But
might not.
you have to have something, you have to have more than an idea.
Exactly, yeah.
You can't just
No, I
say,
get
oh,
that.
I just want to you know.
Yeah, I get that. I just need to
Yeah.
educate myself and then bring information back to you. That's all I had.
A lot of these links are, the names are interesting on that.
I know, but then,
Where they go, I don't know.
where are they going?
Yeah.
So, that's all I have.
Thank you.
One of the links that's indicated here is when I looked at CHFA, they have a CHFA mobile home program. Um, When I was looking to see more of tiny home, but I didn't. So it's,
Yeah.
There's so much information out there. It's too vast and it's not all applicable. It's kind of like going through the weeds or whatever that expression is.
All right, Tom, you were up.
Okay, the state-owned property. That came up and you talked about it a little bit at the last meeting. And my understanding, first I agree with what you and Alan were saying, that before you really go and start buying property, you have to do perk tests and understand that there can be water and sewer and power and everything else. My thought on this, since I have driven by the property, I know you have too, and I assume you've driven by, or at least you're aware of the property, that it seems like a good prospect. It's certainly large enough to be able to do something with. So our next step, I don't want to do perk testing or anything else until, and I don't want to invest any more labor or any expense into it until we know we can acquire the property.
Right.
So going forward, I'd like to propose that we recommend to the town council that they draft a letter to the state, which is Transportation Committee, or Department, stating that we're interested in acquiring the property. That will trigger the state to survey the property, and then the state will give us a price for the property, and then we'll know what we're dealing with. That's the first point, that we can do two things. One, we can find out if there's the state housing authority, if they're interested in assuming it from transportation and donating it to the town so we can do affordable housing with it. That's one approach. Another approach is to then start looking for grants. My understanding of grants is that you can't go in and say, we don't know where we're going, you know, how much money can you give us? You have to go in specifically and track it down that way.
With a plan. So you
Yeah.
probably need a planning grant up front to say, okay, let's
Exactly.
get some money to assess what can we do here.
Right.
And then you'd have to have plans prepared.
well, just,
But-
That's my understanding.
let me understand the
Sure.
process. How are we aware that the property is available for purchase?
We have to recommend to the town council that they draft a letter, go to the state transportation department, and let the state be aware that we're interested in the property.
But has there been an effort to contact the town to say we're about to
No.
sell this off?
No, it doesn't go that way, at this point anyway. It's I don't know how many years ago, but it was in a recent past that the town did send a letter up and do the process that I'm describing. And the state came down and said that there was 200 and, let's say 250. I don't remember the exact number. I think it was 274. But the town wasn't interested in, or didn't have the funds to commit to it at that time.
But my
that's the
understanding
process.
of the legal process
Right.
is that the Connecticut DOT must give notice to the town either first or second after the utility. I think they notify the town, they notify utilities and so on. Has that step occurred to your knowledge?
No, they're not, looking to do anything with it and sell it.
To
So we're
get rid of
going
it.
the other way.
Okay,
The other way is just as appropriate.
okay.
my
I'm not
understanding.
arguing that, I'm
No,
just
I know
trying to
that.
understand.
I know
And is this a lot that would need to be subdivided, or there was discussion earlier that someone said, well, wants to retain X portion of it?
Along 91.
The
That's
ramp, the
that's
ramp.
my
Along
understanding.
91. Yeah, along 91.
The ramp is paved and everything?
Right.
Okay. And so what street has the frontage?
Maple.
Maple. At, I'm trying to think, this is east of Maple, correct?
Yes.
East side of
Sandy,
Maple,
was it
in
Sandy?
the vicinity of Maxwell Drive.
Yeah. I don't remember the names
Do
of
you
the
remember
two
Green
streets.
at Maple?
that
Because
go
you
up.
have- you have the Green at Maple, that redevelopment
Right.
project where they did the
Right.
assisted living. and they
But
did
that's on the
Maxwell
west
Drive.
side.
That's on the west side. It's basically opposite that.
Right.
Okay. And there's a narrow frontage that opens up to more in the back, is that what it is? Is there frontage on a public street, I guess?
Maple.
Do you
Correct.
have a plan that you could take a snapshot of and share with us, so
Yes. Yeah.
at least I understand what you're
Right.
talking about? And, you know, that, then from there, it's easy to look at, okay, what's the zoning, what's the topographic condition, what's the wetland condition,
Oh, yeah.
and so on.
One other advantage of asking the town to draft that letter and send it in is that then the state will come back and say, okay, well, we're doing this, we have this many acres available, and that's what they'll price. We don't even know how much exact acres they're going to offer us.
Okay, and are you suggesting that we have the town with some sort of direction by the manager, the council and so on, and/or with Carrie Zepp's, to collectively go and talk to somebody at DOT, what's the best way to approach this kind of
What
thing?
I'm asking for is a vote by the board to recommend that our town council,
This commission.
this commission, we vote to recommend that the council draft the letter and send it to DOT, just saying that we're interested in acquiring the property.
Okay, so, but we have to
That
convince,
triggers it.
convince the town fathers and mothers that this is a good idea. They wouldn't go to the state unless they agreed.
There's nothing to lose by doing it, because we're
Right,
just
there's no
asking.
commitment.
Oh, I know,
Asking.
we
Right.
make sense, but they may not think we make sense.
Well, we may have to go
That's
before the
something you need
council and
to-
discuss it.
You know,
Right.
you're
Sure.
in the majority party that, you know, you're gonna have a better ear. It's something you don't wanna ask the first time in public. Somehow you're gonna pre-sell this before a meeting.
I wouldn't have a
It's now-
problem
it's now
discussing,
public
but
As we
it's,
sit here.
yeah, yeah. It's,
Sorry, I forget where.
you
Are
know,
we gonna
But as a
do something?
courtesy, you don't wanna show up unless there's a better understanding
I
of what
found,
it is.
I found that to get anything accomplished, you don't want to surprise people.
Right,
Yeah.
as a courtesy.
So I understand that.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
I understand? Yes, thank you.
But, so I'd like to make a motion that we recommend to the town council that they have, in whatever form that they do, they draft a letter and send it to Department of Transportation expressing our interest in acquiring that property.
Second.
Yeah,
Second that.
absolutely.
Third,
Yes.
all in agreement?
Yes. Thank you.
And just as a friendly comment, I don't want to delay that process. There are obviously many different questions and issues,
Oh, yeah.
but I think they'll be flushed out and addressed as the process moves forward. And I concur and advocate that we do at least go forward, and then there may be a stop, they're not gonna do it, and then,
Yeah. Well, we don't know how far we can go until we run into a wall.
I agree.
We should at least know,
Right.
for all we know, DOT might like, yeah, we're not interested in selling.
Right.
And then that,
Yeah, they may have a
Yeah.
plan.
the
for it.
conversation stops right there for us.
Right.
I think it's worth pursuing. How did you even know about that land?
And then it's been, that's been an issue, that's been.
Well, I just wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, when they.
Oh, sitting on open land.
When the, that was the former I-291 right
Right.
Yeah.
lawsuit.
Yeah. Yep,
Way
yep,
back when, to discontinue that.
yep.
And then years after that, there was a redevelopment plan to develop on the west side of Maple, and that's the assisted living at 1 Elizabeth
Right.
Court, Maxwell Drive, and then Maxwell Park at the west end of that property, minus this piece. And we know that the state wants some land for possible staging area for if they have to do construction projects or whatever.
Yeah.
So they've showed us a plan where they want to subdivide or divide off part of that property close to 91 for that possible
Right.
staging area or whatever, so.
I know of 2 uses of it in the last 15 years. One is when they dredged Ferry Park.
Yep.
They
Oh.
took the material there and
Yeah.
dumped it, I'm not sure why, to analyze whether it was contaminated, and I
Yeah.
presume they did something with the dirt after that. And the other is when they rebuilt the West Street, or is the Elm Street Bridge?
Bridge, yeah.
They built one, the one on the western portion there, and they
Yep.
moved it over. Is
Yep.
that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Faintly.
I also heard more recently that there was some talk about pursuing ownership of that property in order to build soccer fields. And that didn't go very far, but it was just talk that I had heard. If we can acquire the land, and there's enough property to it, then it's possible we could have some affordable housing in there and a soccer field. Let's see, altogether, there's 26 acres. But I guarantee at least half of that is, the state's gonna keep.
Yeah, but still.
You never know until you ask.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we've taken the first step.
It's a good thing.
Yep. Oh, he's back, okay. We were gonna move on.
I'm picking now.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a document on the, if we're done with that, I don't know.
Yes,
I
thank you.
thought that was really good, that was very good. From the Office of Fiscal Analysis for that thing for first-time home buyers, if you're using CHFA mortgages, that the towns can be able to, by ordinance, issue $500 tax rebate or tax abatement for the first 5 years. And I know we talked about that in the past. And this is what, I mean, this is, the Office of Fiscal Analysis is saying that there's a substantial fiscal impact, you know, if certain.
Trust me.
I just copied it out for you, but that can still go forward to the town council. I'm reaching out to CHFA to find out, okay, how many first-time home, I mean, do they have that statistic? I would imagine they would. We're a first-time home buyer, and I'm coming into Rocky Hill, and I'm getting my mortgage through CHFA. I don't know if they have that information. I would assume they would, but I'm going to be asking that question.
Not many first-time home buyers can afford it.
Yeah, so, I don't know.
I have a question. I thought I saw somewhere where the first sentence was first-time home buyers, but then they broadened the category in some way that said hadn't owned a home in X years or whatever. I'm aware of someone in town who was a first-time home buyer, got divorced, one spouse got the house, and now the other spouse, is that person able to acquire, to be able to benefit from this so-called first-time
Well,
program?
maybe if Mrs. Smith is not on the mortgage because it's just Mr. Smith's income, so while they benefited by being the spouse of Mr. Smith, now Mrs. Smith goes to buy her own home under CHFA. She is a first-time home buyer because she's not on the,
She was never on the deed as well,
Yeah, maybe.
or on the
I
mortgage.
don't know.
But I
But-
thought there was
so-
something that acknowledged that they had previously been a home buyer on the mortgage, fully involved.
Okay.
But with the passage of time or some other condition, they would qualify. And I think that's really important because
Yeah, it would be.
I think, someone might be further along in their economic upward trending, but not far enough to afford a house in Rocky Hill because they're all, the supply and demand drives the price up. So that's, I don't mean to waste your time, but is there
not a waste of
some
time.
additional ability to qualify even though you're not technically a first-time home buyer?
So similar to what Charles said, right? I mean, could somebody who's selling their primary or the current primary to move into, just for, they were living in Weathersfield, but now they want to come to Rocky Hill, so they sell Weathersfield. Now, when they come to Rocky Hill, are they considered first time or no?
Yeah, they've owned something.
Oh, these little blue post-its are little questions. There's a lot of blue post-its.
And I'm gonna try to go
But that's
back.
okay though, I'm glad.
I'm gonna try to go back and find.
It's a
where
productive
some-
meeting, there's a lot of stuff coming out.
Yeah.
And this is strictly restricted to CHFA loans.
Correct.
Why would that be?
Well, the ability under new law that if the towns have the ability now to, create an ordinance which allows for a $500 tax abatement for up to 5 years for first-time home buyers with CHFA financing.
No, but that's my question, why not any other private open
I-
market financing?
That's what the law says. I
Okay.
wasn't involved with that.
Like baseball rules.
I couldn't tell you.
Three strikes
I don't
instead
know
of
why.
four, who knows?
I don't know why. Purchase via the
It almost sounds like you're
CHFA.
trying to create that monopoly for CHFA.
Well, possibly, but,
Um,
I don't know, but it's CHFA mortgages count towards affordable housing, so wouldn't it be nice to get more CHFA mortgages in town? Just, so,
Without a deed restriction.
Lots of criteria
Yeah,
here.
baseball.
yeah, so, but I will find out. So that's what I got on that. There's more questions.
Meeting dates.
Do you want to do that, or, well, what I did was, and this is from Vessel, it is the next thing is, there's documents for affordable housing, and one of the things that in our affordable housing plan is, once the town starts creating affordable housing units, is standardization of documentation. And there's a housing affordability plan, there's a fair housing marketing plan, and then, I forgot, some of my other notes. The affordable housing deed restriction, the actual deed restriction document. So I figured, rather than give you all types of those things at one meeting, I'm giving you one of them, the first one, the affordable for housing affordability plan. Now,
Can I see the front of that? What does it look like?
oh, okay.
I have that one.
Okay.
Yep.
This is a project that's in existence, that's being constructed now. Charlie referenced it, it's on 125 Ankle Way. This document is public. It was presented during their application process, so I'm not sharing with anyone anything that's not public information.
Okay.
This is an example of an housing affordability plan that, should we be creating units, we would have to prepare or have prepared. This is prepared, their attorney is like the protege of Attorney Tim Hollister.
Right.
Andrea Gomes and Tim Hollister kind of were they helped out with the legislation, the A30G legislation. And so I'm giving this as an example of what an affordable housing affordability plan should be. It should include the property description. It should include, there's a lot of boilerplate in here on
Right.
restrictions of use and subletting and the formula for what's affordable, the layout and the designation of which units would be affordable.
Just a silly question, if I may. Is this a proprietary plan? Can we take this, scratch out Hinkle Way and take it and use it?
There's a housing affordability plan also for Stepney Place, and it's basically the same thing.
Yeah.
It's basically the same
Okay,
thing.
but some prior crime doesn't mean we want to duplicate that.
Yes.
I guess the
I
question
mean-
becomes, is this in the public domain?
This is a public document. This is a public document in that it was presented during the planning and zoning application. So I'm providing this as an example.
No, I understand you're providing
I don't
it
think we
to
can
us.
copy paste it, we can retype it.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah,
But we
no,
can
but
copy
You know,
I'm
paste.
I'm
and we have
serious.
to tailor things to the town of Rocky Hill, obviously. But this is the type of information we need to put.
Well,
into-
certainly Tim Hollister has the pedigree
Yes,
of, and,
yes,
whatever, Gomez,
Yes.
Gomes.
yes.
That, you know, they clearly know what they're doing,
Correct.
and it's probably all court-tested and so on. I'm just wondering,
We have to have
by
our
what right
town.
can we use it?
Okay, well, I'm just saying, I'm using this as an example.
Yeah, and I think it's great.
Yeah.
I'm not knocking that,
Yeah.
it's just,
Yeah,
I don't want you to be ending up having to be visited, you know.
there'll be free room and board. Free room and board, okay? It'll be nice and quiet too. But no, I'm just saying this as an example, and that obviously would be looked into.
Okay.
And our town attorney would have to pass muster with one.
Okay, and in the
Come up
next
with
couple
two.
of meetings, you're giving us 2, 3, and 4?
What was it again? Fair housing marketing plan, example of such, an affordable housing deed restriction. Years and years ago, we came up with the affordable housing deed restriction. It was very basic, because it really was, Rachel Drive was first done. And that was really, we didn't have any affordable housing applications. We didn't even have a committee. And it was put together with the then town attorney and attorney Richard Chivisano, so it was a long time ago. So we last on this. So,
But this document is a big part of what this committee is supposed to be doing, correct?
correct. the big thing with, and this is affordable housing as defined by statute, that's what this is. And on page 6 of the document, it actually has a formula. It's a formula, for example, it's an example of a one-bedroom rental unit, earning less than 80% statewide median income. But see, you have 80%, 60%, 40%. And typically, the 80% is more, quote-unquote, acceptable for.
What's the minimum threshold in
Yeah.
order to qualify
Yeah.
under the law?
Yeah, so.
And I thought I heard that Rockamora, in their proposal, was going to have some at a lower economic level.
That's in public hearing, so kind of not going to be, that hasn't been, there's some, yeah, I mean, we're not done with the hearing yet, so. kind of-
Has the public hearing open?
Public hearing is open, so I'm going to refrain from
Okay, okay.
just
I just-
talking about
okay.
that. Yeah.
Look, so for the dates, I mean, just a quick question, first January 16th is,
Well, yeah, well, it's, if you look at a calendar, and I know that's an off day, I had, where are we here? January 2nd is, where did my months go? The months went away. Because the first Thursday in January is the 2nd. I don't know if
It's
that's
a
something.
holiday week for a lot of people.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's something that's why I asked our admin to put together a draft schedule, and I guess she modified some of the dates based upon
right, so
What
can we do the 9th
was
instead?
on the calendar, because there is, I don't know if that was Board of Ed. I mean, we have one more month to, let's see, January 9th. Because this doesn't have to be to them until, we have to get this in before January 1st.
Okay.
So,
We can,
yeah.
you
But
can
I
find out
I
if
can
9th
ask,
can be done.
but because I thought that might have been a Board of Ed meeting. I'll see if that can be done. Okay.
The rest of them pretty much looks like, they're gonna be the first Thursday of the month, so. Except for July, that makes sense, July 4th.
Yeah, we don't want to do that again. Yeah, and I don't think, I think September,
That's the Labor Day week, if that matters.
yeah, I don't know if people take that off, but,
Kids are back to school.
yeah, so that shouldn't be too bad.
Yeah.
Because they start, I think, at the end of August now.
Sadly.
Yeah, that's changed.
I think the dates look good.
So we'll question the first one.
Yeah.
And that's something I can always pass on via email or whatever if you need to.
But if the Board of Ed is here, we don't need all this room. Is it
No,
because
I
it
mean-
can be recorded, is that?
It can be recorded in room 1C in the community center, and so she actually went and set aside that room for us if we need to, but we can check the 9th to see. If the Board of Ed is here, then we can see if there's another meeting space that is recorded.
So pretty much just in January is the
Yeah.
question mark.
Okay, so this will be on the 12-5 agenda, that on 12-5 agenda. So that, if we could get a motion to table that item.
I make a motion to table the item.
Second.
How is Rebecca doing? She hasn't been at the meetings?
I don't know.
Okay. I'm not asking for personal information,
Okay,
I just
don't-
care
yeah, I
that
don't know.
she's, you know, she's,
Of course.
okay.
Planning and zoning commission activity.
We do have that, as Charlie mentioned, we do have an application currently before the commission. And this is under construction. One of the, there's a few things. There's one thing under our affordable housing plan, page 26, where they talk about adding an affordable housing component to some of the different regulations we currently have in place. And I know the town will be updating the POCD, Plan of Conservation and Development, and thereafter changing the zoning regulations. That's typically what happens. First you develop your plan, and then you modify your zoning regulations to conform with your plan. But we do have this in our affordable housing plan that we modify and add affordable units to certain things in here.
Which item are we on right now?
Planning and Zoning Commission activity.
6B.
We talk about possible areas for exploring of zoning regulation changes. And they're talking about expanding mixed-use buildings in different business districts, regional commercial or commercial, providing at least 15% of units being deed restricted as affordable, allowing multifamily, including but not limited to elderly or active adult in residential districts, providing at least 15% are deed restricted as affordable. So in all of these, allowing that 15% affordable requirement in the Glastonbury Avenue overlay zone, add affordable housing requirements to the Conservation Design District regulations. These regulations are all in place, but we don't have that affordable housing component in there, and that's one of the recommendations or review for consideration things that are in the plan, the affordable housing plan, and that's something you might want to at least look at for a future meeting to see if that's something.
But these are not proposed zoning regulation changes in an upcoming planning and zoning meeting?
They are not, they're in this plan. They're in this plan,
The existing,
the affordable housing plan.
okay.
And it says, review regulations to increase housing options. And that's something that this group, I mean, P and Z can certainly do that on their own.
Okay.
P and Z can do that on their own, but does this body want to talk about that pro or con concerning each of these separate things? Do they want to suggest that P and Z, look at this and then get it off of your plate and move it on to their plate? But always go back to the plan. So that's why I bring it up. And I copied those sections of the regulations so you can see what we're talking about. Concerning the POCD, we did a Plan of Conservation Development is a document required by state law, and it has to have certain types of things to discuss: housing, land use, open space, economic development, and conservation a little bit, and that's all defined by statute. When we put together the RFP for the Plan of Conservation and Development to get consultants, we wanted to also include in that document, make this plan, the Affordable Housing Plan, as part of that document. We want to make, which means as this needs to be updated, the Plan of Conservation and Development would have to be updated by virtue of the fact this needs to be. We want to make the community resiliency plan, which we just got through doing, and the commission will see it at the next meeting, the council will see it at the next meeting. That will be made part of that. And we're talking about, concerns with climate change, flooding has been a big issue in town. What about cooling centers? What about shelters for people? So those types of things are in that document. We're gonna make that as part of the POCD as well. The hazard mitigation plan, which is put together between the town and the Capital Region Council of Governments. We wanna make that to be part of the plan of conservation and development. So there's a lot of things that have already been done that we're gonna be putting into the document. We put out we put out an RFP. There were 5 inquiries. Different consulting firms inquired about it. We have $50,000 to update the plan. There were no respondents. No respondents. No respondents. No one responded to the RFP.
Even the guy who did ours before.
No one responded to the RFP. No one.
How does that get communicated when you put the proposal out? How does it get communicated?
We send it out to 2 companies, and then we also do something in the paper, and we had different staff people in our office send it out to.
So it's got a wide
so-
range of,
So, yeah. But we had 5, and you only get a few people responding anyways, or even inquiring about them. Not a lot of people do these things, so that was the latest. We have, my department head and I sat down and revised the RFP again. But yet, I was told by our town manager that we may be doing more of an in-house type document with a consultant maybe doing the mapping, and so it may, we're still kind of up in the air as to how it's gonna happen, but it will happen. So, that said, I will be getting a memo out to the different boards and commissions and departments and civic groups and other groups in town, whether it be historical society, churches, Board of Ed, about explaining a bit about what the plan of conservation development is and what people would like to see for the town. And keep in mind, it's not something that you're necessarily going to get, because it's obviously, like with the affordable housing plan, it could be a study, it could be we need a new highway garage,
It could be a wish list.
Well, essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
We also would like to include maybe some capital improvements planning in there. In talking to the town manager, he would like to see more of a strategic type of plan and tie it to budgeting. But is that what he wants this to do, or is that what he wants for the council? So there needs to be some more conversations on that. But
Interesting.
it's going to be happening soon.
Is it fair to speculate why there was no interest? Was it because it's too cheap?
We
That
did reach
amount
out.
of work is-
We did reach out to some of the other communities that have the documents. We did research on which communities in the state are, in the same time frame going out for RFPs, or have recently gone out for RFPs.
Right.
And they were looking at 150,000.
So do they have their, are they similar communities?
Maybe in size, yeah.
Population.
Population.
And if-
Some are, some are not.
If they have their new plan, then get a copy.
Well, you can't really do that, because you have to use we have to use
I
our
know.
demographics and things. And we have access to updated demographics and updated data, so a lot of it's, done, so.
I'm familiar with the past
And the
plans
process,
of
yeah.
conservation and development. Does the state have specifications as to what they want? Perhaps we want the more Spartan, cheaper version. I mean, we have an obligation as a town to do it, correct?
Yes, we do.
And what's the failure, what's the penalty, that they take the town planner away, or?
Pick me. No, I hope no one heard that, no. No, sometimes it's tied to discretionary funding.
Interesting.
But updating a plan, if this was our plan of conservation and development, this is our affordable housing plan, updating a plan could be as far as, let's review this document, and we don't like page 3, so we're gonna change page 3. We have updated our plan. I don't wanna do that. We can do that. I don't wanna do that.
Yeah.
I want to take what we have, because there's a lot of stuff in our current plan of conservation and development that is still valid.
The physical stuff should all.
Some of this stuff is still very much valid, but some of this stuff we can take away. Some of this stuff to take away. We're adding documents to it. And then let's expand upon what this is and add that to the POCD. Let's expand upon the community resiliency plan, which talks a lot about drainage and climate change and addressing how are we going to go in the future addressing climate change, because it clearly is an issue. What about cooling centers and things like that? I mean, take and update the plan to address that document. So there's a lot of things that are already done for us. We just have to expand upon it.
Right.
So,
Make it more relevant.
yeah, and some things haven't been done. I mean, cutting off Church Street here, or right
Right.
here, where they cut that off, that was in the 1949 plan of development for the town. It took a while to get done.
So we got it done.
Okay, it took a while to get done, but that was in a 1949 plan.
Yeah.
So, I mean, things do take time, not that long, but it would be nice to. We need to think outside the box, and I think just by talking about affordable housing, I think we're already thinking outside the box with respect to our POCD.
Alright, so then we have kind of set the tone for the agenda items for the next meeting.
I think so, and I can chat with you before then.
For just fine. Last
A
but
lot of
not
people
least,
sit here.
motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Third.
All in
Favor?
favor?
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was good.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground.
Yeah. It's been a long day.
It's been a long couple of weeks for you.
Yeah.
What?
Tired.
He's probably like ready